Washington Ordinance Number 14-1855, an ordinance of the City of Pacific, Washington relating to the recreational and medical use of marijuana, adopting an interim zoning ordinance prohibiting the siting, establishment, and operation of any structures, property, or uses related to recreational or medical marijuana production, processing, cultivation, storage, sale, delivery, exchange, or bartering, to be in effect until the city adopts permanent, in quotes, zoning regulations on the same subject, which includes a prohibition on the submission of business license applications for such uses. This interim ordinance to be effective immediately, setting 6 months as the effective period of the interim zoning ordinance and establishing the date of a public hearing on the interim zoning ordinance.
So, any questions from council before we take public comment? I know we just discussed it. Want to make sure. Okay, with that, I will entertain any comments from the audience that they would like to come up. And I'd like to remind you, you have 3 minutes, and we'll be using the timer. And when you do come up and make public comment, could you please state your name and address for the record? Thank you.
898 Valentine Avenue. My name is James Dusick. 6 months is $35,000 out of my pocket for lease and expenses. That doesn't count the $15,000 already paid since November. I-502 is designed to bring those home grows that you were talking about in your community under one highly regulated roof. Today I delivered you a highlighted copy of the I-502 Liquor Control Board rules. I did that to help point out the regulations that control who get the licenses, involving criminal history checks, financial background checks, inspection of the premises before startup, and 24-hour surveillance that you have to keep DVR'd for 45 days. It also highlights the security requirements with the product and the scope of tracking all product and any waste product produced. You'll notice it's probably the highest regulated business in your city with the most opportunity for income to the city. Many of your concerns are also my concerns. Security, things of that nature, product security. You know, I don't want that to get out into the public or go across state lines. It's very important to run a tight ship. I'm confident we can move forward to a great working relationship with the city beyond this. On the business license application, it states the city is not responsible for ensuring local businesses are in compliance with applicable laws. Other cities have excluded or exempted I-502 business from that federal law requirement, knowing that they want to work with the state and be a part of the popular vote. I also, during the license period that I've pretty much almost completed, I talked with the Department of Ecology about the waste product produced in hydroponic gardening, the way I'm going to do it. And they told me none is considered hazardous waste. It's basically low-grade fertilizers. I have the choice to either take what's wasted and use as the application on the bottle suggests. I could give it to a local farmer and he could finish it off, or he said I could put it down the drain. It's that low impact. The question is, how would you treat my business if I was just growing tomatoes? You know, I'm zoned for light industrial, agricultural, and agricultural processing is allowed. It is a legal business, and there's a lot of opportunity here I think you guys should not forget about. And waiting this extra 6 months, that is a huge weight to bear. And I just hope you just please consider that and just not do this 6-month zoning. Just let us go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excuse me. So who else would like to come up and speak on this topic?
My name hasn't changed since I was here Thursday night.
Please state your name and
I
address
was
for the
just going
record.
to do that. I just said it hasn't changed since I was here Thursday night. My name is still Doug Steinhauer, and I still am on Burton Place. A couple things. First off, let's talk a little bit about the morality of this ordinance. It's not the city council's place, nor is it my place as a landlord to judge whether what these people are growing and distributing is moral or not, because that's not the law is not about morality. The law is about business and economics and how we can serve the city best. Well, we serve the city best by providing opportunities that brings in taxes, number one. And the state of Colorado in the first couple of weeks brought in over $1.75 million in their marijuana sales just for the city. And the city's going to get, I understand, if I'm right, it's about 25% of the gross proceeds of the, is that correct?
At this point in time, the city does not get a portion of the excise tax.
Excuse me, we're just taking comments.
I'm
This is
sorry.
not a question and answer session. Thank you.
Oh, anyway, that's what I've been led to believe, that the city's going to get 25% of the gross tax. And so it's an economic situation for the city that they're putting off for 6 months. And they're depriving their citizens of the tax benefits that the city will get. Secondly, that I understand that the insurance here is an issue that if you go against your insurance company, you're liable to lose your insurance. Is that correct, Mayor?
No, we'll just take comments.
Well, I'm just
not a
trying-
question and answer, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
well, anyway, and if that's the issue, we as the marijuana growers would be more than happy to put up a bond for the city's insurance. There's no name of us or anybody else in the bond that's named for the marijuana, just for that the city would be the beneficiary of the insurance. We'd be more than happy to pay for that. So the city wouldn't be out and they would still have their insurance. And number three is that the security issue, as we just heard, is so stringent by the state that even it's more stringent than the police department can handle. We have to put up cameras and electric fences and all kinds of things to make this thing safe for people, so that there's no break-ins and things of that sort. So, and the other thing is the city already had 6 months, which are a year, in order to go adopt this ordinance, and this is the second or third now extension of a moratorium in the city. And you know, I know you folks should have had your act together much before this. I mean, this has gone on way too long. So I would urge you to prevent any lawsuits for the city and have to lay out any legal expenses to vote yes. And another reason to vote yes is maybe that there's a compromise here that the city could allow my producer and the other producer that stood up here tonight licenses as a test to see that there's no legal problems or no criminal problems, such so that you have something to base your, if you do decide to go ahead with this moratorium, you have a basis of which to base your decision on. And the other thing is you have a medical marijuana place here, you're putting them out of business. You're taking a man's business and you're putting him out of business. And I don't understand how that the city can take a man who's been operating here and just take away his sole means of making a living. I think that's over and beyond the responsibility of the city. Thank you.
Okay, is there someone else who would like to speak on this issue?
Whoops. Try not to kill yourself. Jean Fancher, 37248 55th Avenue South. I have a slightly different take on the whole issue. For several years, I have been talking about stormwater and water pollution and watersheds and from the Friends of the Lower White River. And I noticed health and safety requirements in the whereases. I noticed reference to public lands. I noticed in the definitions several, very extensive set of definitions. I'm flipping through the pages here. And in the, section D, the council acknowledges, that's on page 11, by the way, the council acknowledges that the state has not performed any environmental analysis will assist cities and towns, and therefore municipalities must develop their own analysis and talk about the after-effect impacts. And then in section E, paragraph E, it says the city believes it cannot adopt legislation to address the negative environmental impacts and secondary land use effects. I should state my name and address, Jean Fancher, 37248 55th Avenue South. In section 3, paragraph A, it says if the interim ordinance is adopted, the city will study the secondary land uses impacts associated with the location and siting of structures, et cetera, et cetera. Secondary land impacts are not defined at all. Neither are primary land impacts. I believe the primary land impacts that have been used in environmental impact statements are roads, transportation, possibly air and water quality impacts on schools. But secondary impacts to me means how much gas and pollution comes from the warehouse, the TVs shipped to the warehouses that are going to be in Sumner, and that air pollution coming on me. Secondary impacts means a lot of different things, but it's not defined. And if the city is willing to impose secondary impact restrictions or considerations on this one class of business, then I'd love to see those secondary impacts imposed on all other classes of business too. I think it's really great that you've adopted this language that addresses things that have affected our health and safety for one industry, and I'm just wondering if the city would be digging itself into a hole by singling out one industry and not having fairness for all the other industries and checking at those secondary impacts. And second, how much will the city budget to initiate these studies of secondary land use impacts? How much money do they plan to assess or put to the work of the Planning Commission and the Planning Department? Like you've already hired a fire or will part-time. Land Use Department is down at least 2 planners that I'm aware of, and there is hardly enough time for staff to do the research for the Planning Commission, a group that meets 1 day a month, 1 hour, 2 hours a month. So I'm just wondering how the city intends to enforce and fund the clauses in the ordinance and be fair to all the other businesses that are going to wonder, well, are we going to have our secondary impact studied too? So is this a fair ordinance based on some of the requirements? Thanks.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? All right, come on up.
Hi, my name is Paula, and I'm at 898 Valentine. Just to go over some numbers with you again. Again, we had to have our establishment before we can apply for our license, and that was a 30-day window, and that happened back in November. So where we're at right now, we're at about just over $18,000 sitting for an empty building. And if you make it another 6 months, then we're down another $35,000 for an empty building. Again, the reason we came here is because you didn't have moratorium.
Sir, okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? Anyone else that would like to speak on this? This is your opportunity. Okay. Okay, seeing no other comments from the audience, other comments from council?
I think they're done.
Councilmember Jones?
Yeah, Ms. Fancher does bring up concerns and issues related to budgetary as well as headcount and making sure that we do the planning and impact statements. And just like I said before earlier, that this is a major impact. It's critical that we do this right. It is more far-reaching in some aspects than just this issue, but this one's the most imminent that's being forced upon us by the state and the citizens of the city, and the consequences of us doing it wrong is, I don't know, I understand that the citizens who have invested their money and they are required by the state to have an establishment in place when they apply for their licensing. The concern I have is that if I'm wrong, they can let me know, but that no license has been given by the state yet for any facility. So the investment that they've already input in just to get on the list is a gamble as it is. So we aren't the only ones costing them money in this process. The state has forced them to invest in a location, invest in preparation, all on the premise that they will in fact get that licensing. And that's not right any more than it is for us than it is for the state. But at the same time, we have to make sure that this is done right, and we also have to make sure that we're within responsibility of our insurance. We've just got rid of our high risk. We have to take in consideration of the impact of what we do here and give recommendations to us. There's no way that, as the one gentleman suggested, that they are ever going to be able to cover the impact to us if we lose, based upon our high risk last time, how much it would cost the city to go to court. They don't have the money. We don't have the money. So with that in consideration, that's all I got to say.
Councilmember Kay?
Yeah, I got a letter I want to read, so clerk, you don't have to type out this verbatim. I'm going to enter this into the record. So, I'd like to share the following correspondence with the council in favor of passing the proposed ordinance. I know nothing about marijuana. I've never used it, nor do I understand anything about the plant itself, except that one can get high on its smoke. I do not know what parts of the plant is used for its intoxicating effects, but do know that there are other uses for the plant outside of getting high. For the record, I would like council to consider the following: possible impact of manufacture, distribution, and retail sales of marijuana in the city that need to be addressed. What are the impacts on the electrical systems of the buildings being used? Grow operations use tremendous amounts of electricity, and it could be very easy to overload the circuitry and cause a fire. Should the structures be protected by fire sprinkler systems? Both legal and illegal grow operations are usually discovered due to fire. Should the city require the fire marshal to determine if current fire codes regarding aisle sizes and distances to X's in the escape corridors, are they adequate to allow employees sufficient time to escape safely in the event of an emergency, or should aisles be larger and distances to exits and escape corridors be shortened? Should the fire marshal or building official require special ventilation in case of a fire? Inhalation of marijuana smoke could intoxicate employees and affect their ability to escape a hazardous environment safely, especially if employees attempt to extinguish the fire themselves. Will the drying process be separated from the growing process? And should special protections be in place for that process, i.e. firewalls or isolation rooms? How sterile should the environment be to ensure product is safe to use, and are there any regulations to address this concern? I understand the concept of best practices, but is that enough? Do we need FDA guidance? How will wastewater be dealt with? It should not be allowed in the storm sewer unless it is potable. Will it be treated in-house prior to discharge in the sewer system? If so, will it be monitored? If not, does King County know the impact of this? Will it cost more to treat? How often should these businesses be inspected? What should they be inspected for, and who should inspect them? What security measures should be required to ensure product safety, employee safety, and public safety? What impacts will all of this have on the city's resources? How will these impacts be paid for? How are the plants going to be discarded when they have completed their life cycle? What social concerns are there, and does the city have any social responsibilities regarding use and consumption within the city? Should we consider an ordinance if one does not exist that would require folks with prescriptions for medical marijuana to report to fire, police, and public works departments that they are growing their own plants to better monitor these home grow operations and have premise warnings in place to advise incoming emergency units of the possibility for the need for heightened awareness? So as I said before, I know relatively nothing about marijuana, but have seen some of the problems with it. Do these problems go away with legalization process, or just become exacerbated? Do the old problems go away and new ones created? I do not know the answers to these questions. I also do not have the time to do all of the research myself. Therefore, I'd like to propose that the council consider directing the Planning Commission to form a Citizens Advisory Committee to tackle these questions. This committee should include 1 or 2 members of the Planning Commission, one of which would chair the committee. It should also contain at least 1 member from the industry that does not have to be a resident. It should have at least 2, but no more than 4 members from our community, preferably from opposite sides of the issue to address both sides of the issue. This committee would address the concerns of the council and the mayor. To get answers and provide a sound recommendation to council, it should solicit information regarding concerns from the fire marshal, electrical officials, P.C.S, building officials, public works, planning, police, King County for sewer, waste management, or King County for disposal of plants and other byproducts of the operation, Department of Fish and Wildlife and Department of Ecology for storm sewer concerns, FDA, Health Department, supporters of the initiatives to legalize marijuana, and the Liquor Control Board, just to name some. I believe that this committee could collect valuable information and fully weigh the issues from both sides. This would be valuable for me, and I believe it could be valuable for the council. I think if every council person and city official would come up with a list of questions and concerns, the work of this committee would work to answer them all and either alleviate or validate those concerns so we can make an informed decision that is the right decision for the city. Hopefully free from any stereotyping and unfair discrimination. I know that if we allow this, we will not have all of the answers, and further action may be needed in the future. But we need to do as much as we can now to limit the need for future action in response to problems that are foreseeable. I see the industry just wanting to get started and figure it out as they go. I am not sure that this is the best approach. I believe that the state created this problem, and we are trying to find the solution. So let's not complain about it, and do what we need to do to find the solutions that work best for the city of Pacific.
Thank you, Councilman Kay. Any other comments from council? Councilmember Peckman.
I voted for the initiative to legalize. I believe it is the best solution from a public safety point of view. That said, my concern here is our requirement that businesses operate in compliance with federal law. That's a long-standing requirement. It's been around since before this entire issue came about. And it's a very practical issue. There are many businesses that we do not have local laws against or about. We do not have a city ordinance against child pornography. We don't have a city ordinance against moonshining. We don't have a city ordinance against drug manufacturing. We rely on the provision that businesses must comply with state and federal law so that we don't have to go adopt all of those state and federal codes ourselves into the municipal code and make it bigger than the federal code. So it is a tricky situation for the city to be able to permit this violation of federal law without setting a precedent that requires us to license other violations of federal law. I happen to disagree with that federal law, but it is the law, and it's the law that we have to work with for all of our business licensing decisions. So if I could wave a magic wand, I'd make it at the federal level, and then we could license the businesses today. I think we wouldn't license the businesses today because we don't have an adequate framework for it, but we could. But as it stands now, I don't see how we can exempt one class of business from federal law, from our federal law requirement for a local business license. And I would be very interested to see how other cities are getting around that, other than just turning a blind eye to it, which, as experience in California shows, doesn't necessarily work.
Thank you. Councilmember Holsey?
Yeah. For the past 85 years, marijuana's been illegal in this country. If we go back to the days when our country was first founded, hemp fiber was used in a material called homespun, so it's fabric that people wore. It was used for naval stores, and sails were made out of it, ropes were all made out of it. And after failing with the 18th Amendment and having to have the 23rd Amendment, the 18th created prohibition, the 23rd repealed that amendment. They came up with the Federal Drug Act and made it all illegal. When you make something, possession of something or use of something illegal, that opens up a huge black market industry and opens the door for organized crime, which is throwing a lot of dollars towards re-election campaigns to keep it illegal because the profits are so high. Our city needs to consider, the council needs to consider the impact. The state obviously hadn't got all their ducks in a row yet, or they'd be issuing license. And it's still against the law federally. If you have a bad law, you can work to change it, you can ignore it, or as we have all taken an oath to uphold those laws, then we have very little choice.
Any other comments from council? Councilmember Case?
Yeah. With everything I said, I just want to let people in the audience know, I voted for this 502 issue as well. Just because I don't use it doesn't mean I think I have the right to discriminate others against something that I see as being just as harmful as alcohol, and alcohol is legal. Cigarette smoking, I think, is more harmful, and it's been legal for, you know, we built this country on tobacco. So, only reason I support the 6-month ordinance is so that we can address concerns for the safety in the manufacturing process. If we can address the safety concerns, I fully support having some reasonable process in place to allow these businesses to exist in the city. I am okay with writing an exception for this particular business based on the voters' will, the will of our people, to invoke state rights and allow this against federal law. But I want to make sure that we do it safely and we do it properly.
Any other comments from council? What's council's pleasure?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the proposed ordinance as written.
13-1855.
Yes.
Excuse me, we have to close the hearing.
It's not a
It's not a
hearing.
hearing.
I mean, a meeting, don't we have to close the meeting?
No.
Nope.
Second. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councilmember Case?
I think I've said enough on it.
Okay, Councilmember Holsey?
I believe I understand the position.
Roll call of council, please.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Case?
Aye.
Councilmember Knudsen? Aye. Councilmember Putnam?
Aye.
Councilmember Steiger?
Aye.
Councilmember Halsey?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Being no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and I appreciate your comments.